The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Glory to you, O Lord. Jesus said to his disciples, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and decay destroy, and thieves break in and steal, but store up treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor decay destroys, nor thieves break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there also will your heart be. The lamp of the body is the eye. If your eye is sound, your whole body will be filled with light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be in darkness. And if the light in you is darkness, how great will the darkness be?" The Gospel of the Lord. Long before he was pope or cardinal or bishop, Father Joseph Ratzinger gave a radio interview in 1969, and this is what he said. "From the crisis of today, the church of tomorrow will emerge. A church that has lost much. She will become small and will have to start afresh, more or less from the beginning. She will no longer be able to inhabit many of the edifices she built in prosperity. As the number of her adherents diminishes, so she will lose many of her social privileges. In contrast to an earlier age, it will be seen much more like a voluntary society, entered only by free decision." And it goes on. It's a long quote, but I think the pandemic has sped things up quite a bit in this assessment. And even though the bishops next week have agreed to lift the dispensation or to reimpose the obligation, I think the numbers are still going to be small. And I don't think it's going to be because everybody who's not coming is still afraid of getting COVID. I think it's going to be because there's been a winnowing. There's been a sifting. And it is now going to be more of a voluntary choice for most people. And I'm going into this because we're going through a very strange time in our culture. A time that's being overrun, you might say, by a new enlightenment. Let's not forget that baptism was called illumination in the early church. But in the 18th century, with the advance of the French Revolution and certain secular thinkers, there was what was called an enlightenment. The age of the Enlightenment began, but it was essentially by beheading the church in France. Now, was there reform needed in the church? Well, of course, because the church is always in need of reform. But everywhere that the French Revolution moved, the church was in a bind. And we're into a new age of enlightenment, you might say. Much of the woke cancel culture is misled. There may be good intentions for social justice, but the means have to be appropriate too. And I'm going into all of this because Jesus says, if the light in you is darkness, how great will the darkness be? There's nothing quite so dark as a nation that was once Christian and tosses that aside. Look at Germany in the 1920s and the 1930s. Are we there? No, I don't think that's. But Jesus says, if a devil is driven out and the house is swept and the devil comes back and finds the house clean, he brings in 7 worse devils. Which is a way, I think, of saying that If Christian societies lose their foundation, things get worse than they were when the pagans were originally, before Christianity ever came. Because there's a new impetus to crush the infernal thing, to crush the priesthood, to crush the voice of the Catholic Church. So we pray. We pray for the perseverance that we need to treasure what really matters, the things that truly last. As St. Paul might say, faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love.